Good afternoon, welcome to UK Column News. It is the 16th of December 2014 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, Brian Kerrish and Nick are here in Plymouth, and we have David in Scotland.
David Scott in Scotland.
David Scott in Scotland coming up.
To talk about Robert Greene. A couple of comments on the weather. Pretty cold here in Plymouth, certainly down to freezing overnight. And we have reason to think about those who are homeless, sleeping on park benches, sleeping in sheds. And what a remarkable state this country's in 2014, and we still can't house people, keep them warm and feed them. Welcome to the LibLabCon. General weather conditions, Trowbridge clear at 7 degrees. It's bright and sunny in Rhyl. And as usual and traditional, I've missed the weather in Scotland, but if we go straight over to David, I'm sure he'll tell us. Are you there?
Yes, hello. Hello, Lou. Hello, Brian.
Hello, David.
Good.
How's the weather?
Well, looking out the window, it was sunny and it's now kind of watery sunshine, but quite pleasant.
Okay, lovely.
All
right, we'll just bring this slide in to introduce things, but you're going to give us an update on Robert Greene, who appeared in court yesterday. I've got an overlay that I can bring up here of a few points that I picked up. This is quite small, but we know some people freeze the screen. So if I just run through this. So Robert was in court. I think he was hoping to have his bail conditions relaxed, which didn't happen. But apparently Sheriff Fleetwood effectively recused himself because he said he had a previous association with Sheriff Buchanan. He said that justice must not only be done, but seen to be done. And Sheriff Buchanan is not a complainant in the case, but his name did appear on the original non-harassment order. The case is going to continue until the 13th of January 2015. Sorry, that's a mistake there. Should be 2015, when there'll be a new sheriff, and that the main trial's likely to be postponed beyond the planned 21st of January 2015. And the bail conditions, somewhat draconian, I'm going to say draconian, are in place over Christmas. So Robert remains reporting to the police every day. And Sheriff Fleetwood didn't think that it was appropriate for him to change the bail conditions because it was all controversial, because the Crown had opposed any relaxation. So just a brief and very rough summary from me. Over to you to tell us what really happened.
Yes, well, that's very much it. It was a short hearing, an interim hearing called an interim diet in Scotland, and Robert was represented by his barrister, who is a Mr. McIntosh, and from almost the start of the hearing, Sheriff Fleetwood, who has been, quite straightforward and fair in what he's done thus far in the case. He was the sheriff that first granted Robert bail back in, well, when would it be? May, June time. He's presided over the various hearings since. Now, he had initially alerted the court to a previous association between him and Sheriff Graham Buchanan, and this was a fairly minor association, and all parties were happy for Sheriff Fleetwood to continue to act. But since the trial has started, Sheriff Fleetwood's got a promotion. I think he was a part-time sheriff. Now he's a full-time sheriff, so he's got moved up a level in the judicial hierarchy, and he now finds himself on the same list, the same court ring, if you like, the same court grouping as Sheriff Buchanan. So he's now working on a regular basis with Sheriff Buchanan, and he therefore felt it wasn't appropriate for him to continue with the case or make any controversial decisions. So Robert, having taken the train up from Warrington all the way to Aberdeen, hoping to have his bail conditions removed, found that the sheriff was unable to really to hear any discussion or argument on that basis, because the Crown Office were still opposing any relaxation in bail. Now, this is, I don't know how many months we are now. It must be close on 200 days where Robert has reported every day to the police station. So it's 3 miles out and 3 miles back daily, every single day. And this is, you have to remember, this is a pensioner. This is someone who has no record of violence, quite the reverse. A peaceful, law-abiding man, campaigner for justice, and the quote, somewhat draconian, was how Sheriff Fleetwood described the bail conditions before in court. They're extremely onerous, and now they're going to apply all through the Christmas holidays. So Robert's going to have a great deal of difficulty seeing family members and such like, because he has to report to Warrington Police Station on a daily basis.
This is certainly true, isn't it? And we are seeing at the same time as Robert, a campaigner against child abuse, and as you say, totally peaceful man, has never done anything violent in his life. He is under these draconian bail conditions, and yet we've got people charged with serious paedophilia, sexual abuse against children, who are simply walking free from court with no bail conditions. And we're going to be mentioning Ben Fellows shortly, and it's very interesting that at the moment there's quite onerous bail conditions being put on him. So we're seeing across the country that people that are now speaking up and against child abuse, campaigning for something to happen, they are the ones being subjected to the onerous conditions. It's got to be deliberate.
Yeah, the contrast between Robert's treatment and the treatment of well-connected people in Scotland who have been discovered to have committed crimes which were relating to sexual abuse of children is quite dramatic. There was a very senior fiscal who was dismissed from his job, but there was no prosecution made when he was caught in an embarrassing position with some prostitutes in Glasgow. And then subsequently, when he was found to have child pornography on his computer, he got a community service order. Meanwhile, we have Robert Green, who's peaceful and campaigning for justice, and let us remember, only arguing that the Holly Gregg case warrants a proper investigation, one in which the accused are actually questioned. He's locked up for 96 days without trial and then held on virtual house arrest for hundreds of days thereafter. All of which, it should be remembered, is having an effect on his health. He is a pensioner. He does have a heart condition, and information on his heart condition and the effect that the stress of this is having on him was part of the application for relaxing these bail conditions. But obviously that application hasn't been heard and won't be heard now until the 13th of January. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're very sorry to hear that Robert hasn't at least got a bit of freedom over the Christmas period. He deserves it. On the other hand, I think we're going to say here at the UK Column, we're not surprised, but because this is the pattern going across the country, we think the establishment cornered rats is probably the analogy here, that these people are now getting pretty worried as the truth comes up to the surface, and they are going to go for anybody who is trying to expose the criminality and child abuse. So we'll say a well done to Robert for all his good work today, to date, and hopefully in the next hearing after Christmas, he's at least going to get some freedom, and of course that'll help him work to prepare his case. But one of the other points you've raised is the fact that north of the border, I believe that there is now going to be an inquiry into child sex abuse. I've got a BBC headline here, which we can just bring onto the screen. Public inquiry planned on historical sex abuse in Scotland. It says the move to be confirmed by Scottish Government ministers is supported by opposition parties. The announcement is expected to confirm a timetable, although the precise terms of reference have yet to be drawn up. And we'll just, for that we take that one down, remind people that Alex Salmon, of course, total inaction on getting this investigation, as far as I'm aware. The banner in the background there says it all. Scotland shame, Google Holly Greig. And of course, remember the background to any investigation into Scotland. We've also got to remind ourselves of the Holly Greig abuse and Robert's good work. So what's your take on this, David? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, we got news of this as soon as Robert appeared outside the court building. We were getting phone calls and text messages from supporters to say that this BBC report had gone up and that a Scottish inquiry was going to be forthcoming. Now, firstly, we should welcome this. I mean, we've been calling for this in Scotland for some time, and we've been saying to the Scottish Government, who have been using the detail and the complexity of the situation to avoid making a decision, that you don't need to avoid making a decision. You make a decision that you're going to inquire into this, and you then work out the details with the victim groups and with others. And that's essentially what they've decided to do. So that's good as far as it goes. There is a mismatch here, though. Talk is cheap. You have to have a situation where actions are going to define the character of the administration up here. It's not really consistent to have, on the one hand, an inquiry into child abuse and institutional child abuse, and on the other hand, to be persecuting Robert Greene, campaigner for justice for a child abuse victim, to the extent that they are refusing bail 96 days without trial in jail, and continuing now to refuse or to resist any relaxation in bail conditions. So there's clearly a big mismatch between the policy being followed by the authorities, principally the Crown Office in Scotland, and the statements that are being made in the political sphere. Now, the politicians would claim that the Crown Office is independent, but you have to remember that the head of the Crown Office is the Lord Advocate, and he has a seat on the Scottish Cabinet, so they're not that independent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this leads us into Louise's section here, where she wants to talk about Theresa May and the child issue. If you're able to stay with us, that would be wonderful.
Please.
If you need to go and get on with the day, slip away, and no problem. Over to you, Theresa.
Yeah, okay, here the
May,
Guardian are
here she is.
they're reporting that Mrs May is prepared to give new powers to the official child sex abuse inquiry. Apparently, she is also considering allowing allegations dating back to 1950s to be heard. She told the committee that she was prepared to give survivors a chance to be consulted on her proposed new chair before the name was publicly announced, and that she was confident that the new chair would be in place and the inquiry well underway by the next general election. So she hasn't appointed anyone.
Well, I just wanted to... okay. If you pop that back up on the screen, I've just added a bit to that slide, which is... this has got to be one of the most transparent cover-ups going, so she's delaying it. But let's look at the language. It's historic. We are going to revise the cut-off date. We're not going to bring it forward. We're taking it back. So we're going to say, why don't we extend the inquiry back into the 1400s or possibly the 1300s? Theresa, you're doing everything possible to make sure that we don't actually extend this inquiry up to the present day, where the child abuse is still continuing, which is the reason why we need to put child abuse victims like Melanie Shaw in prison, Robert Greene in prison, Ben Fellows in prison. This woman is despicable, and it's obvious that her job is to cover up. It's not to actually get to the bottom of the child abuse inquiry.
Agreed.
So what's happening with Ben Fellows?
Okay, so I'll just run you down the course of events that have gone on. I received a phone call 1 o'clock Monday morning. I didn't answer it because I was half asleep. Got to my voicemail and it was Ben's partner, Hannah, with a message that Ben had been arrested. He'd arrived at Birmingham Airport. He'd come over to visit friends and he'd been arrested by West Midlands Police. Well, I got on the case with it early in the morning, as did Brian. Brian had a lot more luck than Hannah and I did. Brian managed to get through, found out the Met Police had picked him up. And as the day went on yesterday, it emerged that we'd found out that Ben had been taken in front of a judge at, I think it was Westminster Magistrates Court. He was remanded due to appear on the 29th of December at Southwark Crown Court, and it's over. Is it possible public?
Well, it's perverting the course of justice, but we don't have any more details on that. We only know that it's perverting the course of justice, and it's in relation to Operation Fairbank.
So he is being held at Wormwood Scrubs. Here we have lovely, beautiful-looking building there, isn't it?
Well, it's of historic importance, and of course they got the flowers there. So this is the outward vision of our prisons today. We put the flowers and presumably freedom through work over the doorway, and in people go.
Okay, so he was. It was all under Operation Fairbank. And according to Wiki, Operation Fairbank was the police investigation that was first set up under the conditions of secrecy, and it was reported focused on claims of sexual abuse and grooming of children involving parties of men at Elm Guest House, close to Barnes. And in January 2013, The Independent reported that police were investigating claims that Cyril Smith was sexually abused boys at Elm Guest House. So it's all in relation to this. I think the dates they were looking at for
Ben,
for
were
Ben.
November and early December in 2012.
Yeah, when he was being quite vocal on the allegations he was making. So we had a little look around the web and spoke to a very nice gentleman who wrote these two articles. His name is Giles Sheldrick. And we spoke to him this morning. He's going to do some more investigations on this. But here are the two articles that Ben appeared in the Express.
So Ben was specifically talking about child abuse within the glitzy
BBC,
media, the BBC,
exactly.
Parties, drugs, sex, children. He was saying he was there amongst it. And then
we found this article in Exaro. Police arrest a man over fake accusations false accusations against Kenneth Clark. And you were quite surprised that where it was a case of mistaken identity, weren't you?
Well, this is a very interesting article because it's apparently one of the Exaro journalists who says that he had the knowledge going back to the Cook report time, which said that what Ben was alleging couldn't possibly be true. The end of this article says a former senior Conservative figure suggested to Exaro that it may have been a case of mistaken identity, but according to Exaro's article, they had all the facts, they had all the evidence to prove that what Ben Fellows said was not true. Now, we're waiting to see what more we can find out, but at the moment we can't actually find out where all that evidence is that Exaro says it can prove that Ben's statements weren't true. What we have is some journalists, one journalist in Exaro who's said, well, I worked with the Cook report and I didn't see anything, therefore what Ben said can't be true. So this seems to us to be questionable. But we're very interested that Ben has said that basically somebody touched his genitals, and according to Ben, his statement is, I think I would remember who touched my genitals, but according to Exaro, a former senior Conservative figure said, well, it was probably a case of mistaken identity.
Exactly.
So Exaro, very interesting organisation because, of course, they're a mix of so-called investigative journalists and ex-police. They seem to be privy to a huge amount of information to do with child abuse cases. They're always leading the stories. Yep. They're saying at the moment, get ready for the film rights because the story is going to break about paedophile rings in government. They seem to be very well informed and they don't seem to get any hassle. I don't think their offices have been raided. Are they maybe a bit too close? I don't know whether you can comment on any of this at all, whether it's on Ben or wider issues of the child abuse, David.
Well, it all emphasises the need for a proper investigation, because you can't have a situation where people are making public declarations of serious criminal wrongdoing against the people who run the country or used to run the country, and nothing happens. It's all out there on YouTube, and occasionally someone might go to jail. But there's never any questions asked of these people. There's never there's no public inquiry. The police investigations have, we know, been terminated on multiple occasions in the past when they've been getting too close to the wrong people. And we've had numerous police officers coming out and stating it live on air and for the record. So it all emphasises why we need a full, transparent public inquiry, and a public inquiry that covers the whole of the nation, without any jurisdictional demarcation lines becoming a problem. Because we have North Wales, we have multiple problems in Scotland. We've got cases all over England and Northern Ireland too, with the boys' home there. So we need to see how this joins up. We need to fully understand the nature of it, and people have to come clean. So there's a lot of pressure going to mount on the Theresa May inquiry to actually deliver on that, and obviously it's not been going well so far.
No.
Can I just say we are waiting for a prison number to come through so people can start writing to Ben. I did email them this morning because they wouldn't give it over the phone. So as soon as I get that, we will either get it up onto the UK Column website and Twitter it out. And Facebook.
I would also say that having seen the effect that prison has had on Robert, that people who are close to wherever Ben is locked up, they should write to him. They should get along and see him. He'll be held on remand, which means he can get visitors most days. But there's not very much to do when you're on remand. There's no prison work done. There's a lot of time in your cell, and the only break in the day is visiting. So it becomes a very important part of a prisoner's life, and he might be in there for a wee while. So if anyone watching is within commuting distance of where he's being held, please try and get in touch and spend some time with him, because it'll mean a lot to him.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed.
Thank you for that. Excellent
Thanks.
advice. And just a couple of last comments. Of course, Ben felt he was being threatened, is the correct word, threatened by the police after he started to tell his story about what he knew about abuse of children in these high-level rings. And eventually he took the decision to move overseas because he didn't feel he was safe in this country. We understand that the police were expecting him back. There were no restrictions on Ben going overseas at all, but we understand the police were expecting him back mid-January this year in order to carry out further discussion. There was no obligation, no court orders or rulings for Ben to come back. Ben didn't come back because he was concerned for his safety in this country. And what a statement that the moment he steps off the airport in Birmingham, not just one police force, but two police forces there in numbers in order to arrest him and put him in prison. So we're going to stay very much with Ben Fellows. We'll be reporting on what's happening to him. And as David's just said, if you can help in any way by writing to him, or if you're the London end visiting, that would be really excellent. Well, we'll move on from there to the Telegraph. Always an interesting newspaper. Of course, it puts itself up front as being the professionals' newspaper, very truthful and accurate with little...
Did you say Guardian there?
Telegraph.
Oh, I thought you said Guardian, sorry.
I think... right,
Telegraph,
so that we know. If I said Guardian, that was another of my special Freudian slips. But here's an interesting little article from Telegraph Travel, and it says kissing banned at Warrington railway station. Now, somebody sent it in thinking of Robert Greene, but it basically indicates that kissing's been stopped at Warrington Bank Quay railway station. And the Telegraph says, forbidding amorous travellers from locking lips. Well, they go on to say that basically they present a selection of equally amusing and unusual signs sent in by readers. And we're going to say, isn't this fascinating? Because is it amusing that a railway company has taken it upon themselves to stop what most people would regard as innocent affection between people?
What they're allowing instead, stabbings?
Well, this is it. So I think what we've got going on here is the Telegraph nudging. It's making a joke of the fact that this represents ever more state control. And the dangerous bit is you laugh it off. Oh, it's a bit of nonsense. But no kissing, no touching on train.
No smiling.
No smiling, no smoking, no dogs, no children. We know where this is going. And let's stick with the Telegraph because they're doing it again here, we think. So the Telegraph, we need a thinner blue line. And we've got this smokescreen of an article where it would appear that they're criticising the Met Commissioner, Hogan Howe, for coming out and saying that we should amalgamate the police forces into the Euro regions in UK. But look at how they put it. Sir Bernard is correct in his analysis, but some of his solutions are debatable. And then when you read through the article, they're saying, well, we could give more police work to private contractors. There's the privatisation there. And of course, that will release officers for upfront policing. We can merge operation rooms and we can share equipment. And this is what's going on with the police. For example, moving in to share offices with local authorities. So then they switch to the other side. They say, where we part company is his proposal to reduce the 43 police forces. What's the reason? Well, he's going too far, too fast. Oh. Right? So we're not really criticising. We're just saying he's going too far, too fast. And then if we get down to the end, it says, might it not be better to transfer serious crime responsibilities to the National Crime Agency and boost its staff? So we've got a quango now digging deeper and deeper into law and policing. And here's the Telegraph saying, give them even more power. And then they end, nonetheless, the Commissioner is right to voice his concerns about where the next round of cuts will lead. We need a debate about the shape of future policing. So this is absolute applied psychology. Totally. Let's drift in the concept that we need massive change with the police. And of course, what's that change going to bring? As with Police Scotland, a single police state under the control of a few. So this one is, of course, hot on topic because Ian Crane's been back with us talking about fracking. And an amazing story. The police asked Canterbury Christchurch University for a list of attendees at a fracking debate. And apparently fracking could, a Green Party councillor criticised the police request. But we just have a look here at The Guardian, a linked article from The Guardian where one of their journalists is pointing out a series of articles where people are getting concerned about the rise in police surveillance. So the first one here, Supreme Court verdict now awaited in crucial police surveillance case. John Catt, 89, has fought for 3 years to compel the police's domestic extremism unit to destroy its records on him. Well, there we go. That's self-explanatory. Police concede allegations over attempts to turn activists into informers. So this is the police attempting to get in amongst anybody who's challenging the state. And the third one here, police ordered to disclose more details of undercover infiltration. So we just bring you back to this one, which we had up yesterday, where we're saying, hot on the heels of the amalgamation of Scottish police forces, we've got Bernard Hogan Howe saying we're going to do the same thing south of the border. And we brought in dear old Ken Clarke because he said, well, together with amalgamation of the police all right-thinking citizens should support secret courts. Well, let's have a look at this in context as to what happened at the university. 200 people went to the debate on fracking, and they were going to question a panel that included a geologist, engineers, councillors, and an analyst from a think tank and a campaigner. And Kent Police said they needed to get access, basically, the threat and risk for significant public events in the country to allow it to maintain its public safety. So the police needed to get into a fracking meeting in order to maintain public safety across the country. It's brilliant, isn't it? And basically, the request follows disclosures that police have been monitoring political activists at universities around the country and spying on groups that use non-violent methods to further their aims.
Whoa.
So UK column, British Constitution Group, we've always said lawful rebellion. We've always said whatever you do out there, do it peaceably. And now we can see, well, that doesn't make any difference, that we are going to be on a blacklist of the police so they can protect the whole country.
We're going to be. I'd say you already are.
I think I'm fairly well up on at least one list, and thank you very much for the people who pointed that out. But we said what was happening in Spain, where police blacklists of activists are going to be formalised. So if I just add two more comments on the end of that one, Nick, here we go. At Lancaster University, police took photographs of two posters reading "Not for Shale," a reference to shale gas, and "End Israel's attacks on Gaza." So the police take pictures of it in the window of the Students' Union, and they tell the union president that she was potentially committing a public order offence. And at the Canterbury fracking debate, there was a Mr. Ian Driver, a Green Party councillor in Thanet. He's got no criminal record, but last year he discovered that his political activities have been monitored and recorded by the police. So do we need protection from the activists? We don't think so. We need protection from the police. And here's what Kent Police said. Kent Police assesses the threat and risk for significant public events in the county to allow it to maintain public safety and appropriately allocate resources. Police attendance was not required during the meeting, but the Dover District Chief Inspector did attend the event as an interested stakeholder. And I know if Mike was here, he would be saying, well, there you are. The stakeholder says, well, actually, these are not independent police officers. They're acting in a quasi-political capacity.
Yeah, definitely.
It's getting very interesting, isn't it? As we head up to Christmas, innocent people put in prison, people whistleblowing put in prison. What are the police doing? Spending time spying on us.
Yeah.
Should have a look
We're not
under your pillow.
surprised, yeah.
Well, look, this is the sort of man, we mentioned him yesterday, Lord High Admiral Lord West. Well, we mentioned him because we've never been too impressed with this man who's supposedly been responsible for Britain's anti-terrorist policy. And up he pops in the BBC News, and he's stating the British were not involved in torture. It was all the Americans, it was all the CIA. And speaking to the BBC, he said, we have to prove that we have standards of decency that put us apart. Well, what are the Lord High Admiral's standards of decency? This was him enjoying a salacious little party in Westminster. I've shown this before, but what better way to say the sheer hypocrisy of the man? One minute he was dressed as a pirate, the next minute he was as a James Bond with his half-naked floozy here. And what he's doing is saying the British were not involved in torture. Well, we're going to say, Lord West, it's not the British we're interested in, it's the politicians in Britain who were involved and then attempted to cover their tracks. But since you seem to know so much about who was involved and who wasn't, perhaps we can be inviting Lord West to any future inquiry into torture to see what he just does know. I pause at this point because You think to yourself, what more can you say?
Go on then.
David, I'll give you 30 seconds if you'd like. I saw you smiling there.
Okay, a couple of quick things. Up here in the testing ground, as we like to call it, we've got one police force. An example of how the link between the community and the police force is being broken down by this. We had a preacher in Perth arrested in Perth High Street for reading out of the Bible. Now, he'd a good loud voice and he was projecting his voice. It's called preaching, I think. And despite the fact there were several buskers in the same street with electronic amplification, he was the one who was arrested. Now, he was arrested because someone had made a complaint because they found him annoying, which is now apparently a crime in Scotland, because if you're annoying, you can be arrested for breach of the peace.
Yeah, well, that can't be true, because many people would say that Alex Salmond is deeply annoying and he's still out there. So
Well, I annoy many people, but so far I've managed to escape the dragnet. The police took him to the local police station now. So it's Perth High Street to Perth Police Station, which is about 2 blocks away, and you've got to turn maybe 3 corners. And he kept his phone running during this, and the recording records the police officer driving the car asking for directions. She couldn't find her way from the high street to the police station because she'd never been to Perth before. So what she was doing there, we don't know, but this is Police Scotland. There were consecutive numbers on the lapel badges, so maybe that's how the decision's made.
they all came out the same factory, David, is what it was.
That's worrying, though, isn't it? It's very worrying.
So not only was this man arrested, charged, the charge was held over him until he left the country, actually, for not doing anything, because preaching's not a crime. There has to be evidence of criminal wrongdoing to be arrested, and there wasn't. But he got arrested anyway because he wouldn't shut up. He wouldn't do as he was told. He didn't obey orders. So that's point number one about an integrated police force. You lose the local link. You lose the fact that you might know the face, that you develop some sort of local rapport. Would a Perth policeman have done that to a Perth pastor? Because he was a Perth pastor as well. He wasn't some sort of travelling guy. He was from a church in the town. If there had been some sort of local link, probably not. Another quick point: this risk assessment. Risk assessment is the cause of everything now. The reason that we have a named person, state-appointed guardian for every child in Scotland is the state has to risk assess every child in Scotland, because you never know. So these people have to then assess the risk and decide what's going to happen. And then they've got to take action on what they predict is going to happen to remove that risk. Now, I could bore you for a great length of time on the subject of risk, because it's something I deal with professionally. But suffice to say, risk has 2 meanings. One's objective and measurable and actually means something. And the other meaning is belief. And these 2 meanings are conflated. So if a government official believes you're a risk, that's a risk assessment. And it can be no more or evidence-based than that. Belief, gut feel. And the state will start to take action against you or yours because of a gut feel or belief. And then this somehow develops the force of law. And all of that's very risky for us.
Yeah, a very serious subject. I'll tell you, for the new year, if you'd like, we'll do an in-depth segment on this business, the templates, the fact that we've got public officials who can only act now if they're following a template, risk assessments that you're talking about, absolutely spot on. People no longer thinking, no common sense, just acting to instructions.
Yes, tick box tyranny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
one final comment just before I go on torture. During a little local unpleasantness called the Second World War, which did put this country at greater risk than it currently faces, we didn't torture prisoners. The prisoners that we took expected to be tortured or shot out of hand because of their own propaganda. And when they actually had a very intelligent investigation and then were put into cells afterwards, cells that were bugged, and they would talk and they would say to one another, what did they ask you? The security services actually got a lot of usable information. torturing people doesn't work. They will say anything. It doesn't work. It never has worked. We knew it in 1941. I can't understand why that lesson's been forgotten now.
I think it's something to do with the people we've allowed in. Just a little bit of clock watching this end, David, so we must move on fairly swiftly through the rest of our news today. Bring people's attention back on on big finances in the world. And what better place to start than the BBC with Robert Peston, that well-known common purpose reframed economist. Now, we were prompted onto this by an email that we were sent, and part of it said, as the current oil price drop is the result of price manipulation and nothing to do with market supply and demand, one must assume that these global financial entities are conspiring against Russia and are engaged in a profound struggle to determine who runs the world, the people or the banks. Isn't this what Ukraine and the demonizing of Putin is and was always about? Now, we agree with that. So the BBC article, we'll do this very quickly, from Peston. Western sanctions imposed to punish Putin for his Ukraine adventure make it all the harder for Russia's undersized non-oil economy to trade the country out of its mess. So Robert Peston, who on earth is he? He just happens to be somebody working for the BBC who's been a big wheel in common purpose. Here he is hammering Russia. We want to destroy it, to punish Putin. This language is quite extraordinary. It goes on to say that Russia's central bank expects the economy to contract not far off 5%, and they're going to push up interest rates from 10.5% to 17%. Is eye-catching. So apparently Peston thinks that's all very amusing. He says Russia isn't bust yet. In the middle of the year, it was projected by the IMF to hold reserves equivalent to about a year's worth of imports. That'll probably be down to nearer 10 months now, but provide some sort of cushion. So this man absolutely crowing at the suffering of a nation, and of course that means children, that means elderly people, as a result of sanctions by the international banks, based on the Ukraine, where we've got the likes of Cameron. We've seen an example of what's going on in Britain. Hypocrisy. Well, the Telegraph, we're focusing on the Telegraph. They're on it as well. Russian economy on the brink as emergency moves fail to shore up collapsing ruble. An overnight interest rate by the central bank led to a brief rally. Emergency move came as a monumental decline in oil prices and continued uncertainty over Ukraine. While the prospect of a Russian default is considered a remote possibility, several key companies risk bankruptcy is accepted. So the Telegraph crowing here, problems in Russia, big companies go bankrupt. That actually means thousands of people lose their jobs and can't feed themselves. Telegraph thinks this is amusing. Well, let's go to the Moscow Times, because this is fascinating. Here we are. Russia's central bank hit by accusations of sabotaging the ruble. And what it says is that the prosecutor's central office is looking into the central bank in Russia after a ruling party lawmaker accused it of being an enemy of the country by supposedly driving down the ruble and plotting evil against Russia. And it goes on to talk about what they're up to. So Fyodorov is the man, United Russia lawmaker and member of the State Duma's Budget and Tax Committee, has charged that the troubles were the central bank's fault. And this is pretty astute. The central bank is an institutional enemy of the country. Its bosses are officially abroad. I'm assuming it will do the maximum evil. The central bank will do everything to have the ruble rate fall. So it seems to me that the Russians are now starting to look at the seat of the problem, which of course is in the world's totally corrupt financial organisations. And let's remind ourselves of this one, which the UK column covered a few days ago, excuse me, that we had links between Mandelson and billionaire Russian oligarchs, the very people who are working to destabilise Russia. And that puts into perspective, of course, this man, so here he is, Mark Carnage, as Mike would call him. He's been tweeting that he wants diversity in many forms: gender, race, background, belief and orientation. Remember what this is. This is the man supposedly running the Bank of England. And what's he concentrating on? His job? No, he's going to tell us how to run our lives. So we've added a bit to this. We've said, trust me, you Brits, I'm a Canadian. I don't give a stuff about your little island. We've wrecked the economy, control all the money, and have increased unemployment. And now I'm going to advise you on diversity to nudge you towards the destruction of nation states. And, well, what's coming on top of that? This man is he's disgusting.
Yep.
Why don't we send him back to Canada? He's not British. Let's carry out a little bit of diversity policy and gently move him back over the Atlantic. And what sort of carnage is Mr. Carnage causing?
Well, apparently councils are turning away teenagers who are becoming homeless. A charity called Coram Voice has just released a report entitled The Door is Closed, which focuses on homelessness among children and young people known to the social care system. Its findings concluded that there are child protection failures on a grand scale, and it's not just limited to sexual abuse. It also warns of youngsters being placed into hostels where gang violence is on the rise, and this is also causing youngsters to be living on the streets. And I'm going to do a little bit of investigation on this charity because I didn't have time. But these are the people who have done the report, and they
we
do
know
look after.
people are living on the streets because they're contacting us here in Plymouth, and it was pretty cold over the last few nights. And we got the inflation coming into households.
Yeah, and Press TV reporting on it. I couldn't find it anywhere else, actually. They're saying the Office of National Statistics findings that the poorest of 10% of the country faced an average rise of inflation of 3.7% since 2003, compared to 2.3% for the top 10%. Apparently, price rises have gone up by 39% for the bottom 10%, and these findings come on the back of TUC warning of a huge pay gap in the UK's workforce. So it'd been good to have Mike's
we'll do some detailed money and economy next week.
Apologies, here we go.
We always apologise when this man comes on the screen, but here he is.
Here he is. Tony Blair's office has told The Times that Mr Blair had not yet been summoned to appear before the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee, but would accept an invitation once it arrived. This is in relation to what Mr Blair knew about the British complicity in torture. Yesterday, Theresa May denied that she had asked the US Senate for any redactions with regards to Britain's involvement. What were your thoughts on that, Brian? She's come out and said that she didn't go over there and ask them to keep him out.
I know this
is she telling porkies?
I know this is shocking, but I don't believe that Theresa May tells the truth.
Really?
I've come to the conclusion I think that she may not tell the truth. So she goes over to America, but she didn't have discussions. It's a bit like listening to Bill Clinton, isn't it, really?
It's true.
I don't know whether there's an analogy there, if that's the correct word. So, Mr Blair, what did he say?
Mr Blair, well, a spokesman for him has come out and said, for the avoidance of doubt, Tony Blair has always been opposed to the use of torture, has always said so publicly and privately. He never condoned its use, and as it's shown by internal government documentation already made public, thinks it is totally unacceptable. Liar.
Well, let's add this little bit in because we don't often see little Nick Clegg. He's the man in the background.
He's looking a bit rough there, I tell you.
And what does he say?
Well,
he says... Go on.
Well, he's spoken out actually about the torture inquiry and said that the last Labour government should give evidence to the ISC on what they knew about UK intelligence agencies' role in torture. He then noted 2 cases of rendition through Diego Garcia back in 2002. He said torture is wrong in any circumstances. There are no ifs and buts. You cannot, as a free democratic society, lower yourself to the barbaric standards of those who want to destroy our way of life. And then he continued on to praise Sir Malcolm Rivkin and said that additional muscle should be given to the ISC to fully explore these murky events.
So they want the very the intelligence and Security Committee to investigate what it did and knew.
A bit like the BBC investigating what the BBC knew.
The people controlling what was happening around the torture are going to investigate themselves And Nick Clegg says, what better person than Mr. Rifkin to do that? It's quite
You couldn't
laughable.
make it up.
We can't make it up.
You
We
can't.
don't. We do try and tell the truth. A final word from you, David, if you're still there.
Yes.
That's enough.
Wasn't expecting that. Just one final point on the risk assessment. We have Scotland has now banned smoking in your car if you have a child in the car. So they'll be pulling people over and giving them tickets because of the extra risk they're causing to their children.
Are they going to be pulling the children out of the car and taking them away if the parents are smoking?
Maybe if you're a repeat offender, I don't know yet. We'll see. Who knows?
Who knows?
But it's everything's linked in Scotland. So if this is noted, then that information will be sent to your social worker and your school and the health professionals and things. All the information is linked and shared.
Yeah.
Very, very small risks are being pursued at the expense of personal liberty. But huge risks like institutional child abuse, well, so far we haven't seen an awful lot of action, but we're promised some. So we'll see.
Okay, right. Thanks very much for joining us. Excellent report again.
Thanks, David.
Things very serious north of the border happening, I think, faster almost than we're seeing south of the border, but same direction. It's an emerging police state.
Okay, Christmas party, UK Columns party tomorrow night. Lots of surprise special guests coming down to see us and to see viewers and listeners. And bring some friends if you want. Try and wake them up. Bring them down. Within reason, yeah.
Reason. We only have one room.
UK bumper stickers, UK Column bumper stickers, T-shirts, leaflets are all available from carol@ukcolumn.org. And as I say, the party tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. at the George in Plimpton.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Louise is very keen to finish because she's very cold. The studio's
Freezing
very cold here.
today.
Okay, that's it. We'll be there same time tomorrow.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.